Hello and welcome everyone to today's Circular Wool UK event, which is all about exploring research, creativity, innovation and systemic design. My name is Sana Visser and I'm a PhD researcher at the Centre for Circular Design, as well as a knowledge exchange research assistant. Today I'll be your host, and sadly, Professor Rebecca Early can't be here today as she's unwell, and she would have otherwise co-hosted this with me. Yeah, I'm really excited to have you all here for this event, and thank you all for signing up and going through the forms. And sorry about that, it's just part of the job when it's part of a design research program. It's a bit more light touch than it might have looked initially. So I'd like to first flag the partners of today's collaborative event, which is obviously the Centre for Circular Design. In short, the Centre for Circular Design is at the University of the Arts London and is a leading voice in academic design research and knowledge exchange. The team focus on using practice research approaches to steer and support circular economies and communities around the globe. Second up is the Shemakes research project, and it's an EU-funded project that focuses on innovation as key to bridging the gender gap in the textile and clothing industry. The goal of Shemakes is to empower future female innovators of the sustainable fashion industry through inspiration, skills and network. And I've been really lucky enough to work on this project, and we'll hear more from Marion later about what this project is and how you can also get involved later on. And then our third partner is World Circular Textiles Day, and some of you might have heard of this, and if not, this takes place every year on the 8th of October, and it was launched to celebrate the efforts of a growing community of companies, organisations and individuals actively working towards a circular textile future. It hosts a living, breathing time capsule to record the progress and chart the momentum of circularity in textiles, an ever-evolving roadmap towards circularity is being created to drive, support and steer the industry towards a positive future, which is obviously much needed. That's why we're all here today. And now I'm going quickly into the agenda. We've got, as you can see, a whole packed agenda with amazing speakers lined up. So hopefully you can sit it all out and be fully absorbed with all the amazing talks that we're going to see. Before we're going into the talks, I'm going to explain you a little bit about the exercise that we're going to do, which is called the How Might We exercise, and I'll explain that in a minute. Then we'll have 6 speakers lined up, a small coffee break, comfort break, and then we'll have a final 5 amazing speakers, and then we'll review of what's been said in How Might We, and maybe some overall themes that have occurred throughout the session. So how might we? What are How Might We exercises? Some of you might have joined us last year in the Curiosity project, where we've also done some How Might We exercises, and what this means is basically a brainstorm session to think of any new ideas that might come up and how you can actually start even new projects and kind of help you think of different ideas that you might see. So how does it work? I'm going to share, or if Claire Leopinia can maybe do that in the chat box, share the link to Miro, and what you'll see, a pop-up screen will appear in your browser, and you do not need an account for this. All you need to do is zoom in or zoom out. So on your screen in your browser, you'll see a little plus and minus on the top, on the bottom right corner, where you can zoom in and zoom out. On the left-hand side, you'll see there is a little toolbar with a little arrow, a little text bar. But all you really need to do is go to the post-its, and what we'll be doing, as we will be hearing the speakers talk, you'll be able to actually add your ideas and thoughts to this through using the How Might We framework question setup. So we've got this framework from Gwen Cunningham from the Circular Economy Amsterdam, and it's a really great way to think of ideas that are not too big, but neither too specific or sort of already implying solutions in it. So how might we think of systemic design changes to revive interest in circular wool, for example? Maybe even still too big, but it can be anything, any thoughts that you might think of. So as you listen about the research, what kind of questions, comments or ideas come up for you, in particular, how we can use design research to support gender equity, and how can we create new systems? So yeah, hopefully you'll be able to explore. So hopefully it doesn't distract you too much from listening to the talks and be distracted by the software. I'm sure some of you have used it. If not, don't worry. We are there to help as well. So if you do have troubles with going into the Miro, write it in the chat box and we can add it to the board as well. The idea is that we'll review this at the end of the 2.5 hours and we can actually see what's been thought of in these sessions. So hit the link, have a explore on the Miro and see if you do manage to get access, and we'll go from there. I'm just going to check if people are able to go on it right now. Yeah, I can see about a good number of people being able to access. So all you have to do is double click on one of the post-its and it will automatically resize and you can add your thoughts. So if I would zoom in, so you can use the zoom plus and minus bar at the bottom right corner to zoom in, or use your scrolling, you can hit one of the post-its, you can give it a go. How might we use technology to create new wool applications? I don't know. It can be anything. So give it a go on one of the post-its to see if you can make it work. If not, we can use the chat box instead. So before we're gonna, so I'm just gonna go back to the presentation and we're gonna actually dive into the rest of the talk. So please let me know. I can see there is some chats in the, yeah, great, fantastic. Right. Why wool? Great question. I'm sure many of you will be able to answer that. All around the world, questions about why we are wasting wool fleeces have become burning issues, literally. In a time of extreme climate crisis, we are not using our textile resources well, and this in particular seems like a design crime. But what is it actually design problem, or are we facing a systemic challenge that we all need to work on together? How can design research help? Whilst we were going to have initially a keynote by Becky, as she's been unwell, sadly we won't, but she did want to say something. So here's a little message from Becky for you guys.
Hi everyone, I'm really sorry I can't be there today. Coronavirus finally got me and I'm feeling pretty yucky. I had wanted to make a film with some slides to give you the context for today's event, and of course I did want to be there co-hosting with Sane, but that's not going to be possible. So I just wanted to very quickly say thank you very much to all the speakers who have agreed to attend and prepare and to make films, and to all of you for coming along and sharing your thoughts on the Miro board and being part of this conversation, which I think is a really, really important one. I did want to give you a little bit of a background about why we're looking at wool at the moment and where this work has been emerging from in our work at Centre for Circular Design, very much through the UAL's partnership with the city of Bilbao, but and sort of dating back to autumn of 2019 when we first started talking to partners in Bilbao about their local wool there. But also, I think through the Shemakes project, which you'll hear a lot about today, and connecting with small regional hubs around Europe with lots of different makers, lots of women and girls who are all involved in using and working with wool and textiles in some way. And it's one of those projects which has just sort of begun to come together. Lots of different elements, lots of different conversations have all started pointing very strongly in a direction for us. And I think along with UCRE launching its national network recently, as well as the range of projects and initiatives focusing on circular design and regenerative design, this is going to be one of the most important conversations we're going to have with materials, I think, in the next few years. And it sits really nicely alongside our work in polyester and biosynthetics and regenerated cellulose and the other kinds of materials we're pursuing in the other projects at the centre. I wanted to quickly name check Charles Ross, who came and he's a long time friend of our group, but he came to give us a talk on regenerative wool and farming a little while ago. And actually Philippa Kay and the Ellen jumper, which was a jumper that made from Swedish wool in very low impact ways that Philippa Kay sort of did a few years ago. There's so many projects and examples of good practices out there that I would have loved to have gone through with you in an intro. I'm really just going to be able to sort of name check now the ones that have been really most significant. All the partners in Bilbao that have been challenged by their local wool, the Lacha wool, that's really inspired me to look more closely at what's happening in the UK and to reach out to my contacts and network and really think about what this conversation might be like for us to have at this point. It's really about, today is really about design research. I wanted to see who was doing what in design research, where we all meet or disagree, and where the opportunities might be for projects like Shemakes to take forward or others to take forward, certainly around this idea of gender equity. And yeah, it keeps coming back to textile design, what the textile designers of the future might be able to work with and to affect in terms of change in a very sort of national and fundamental cultural and economic level. So that's probably as much as I can manage with no slides and no preparation and a very fuzzy head. But I wish you all a great session and do keep in touch and take care.
Thank you so much, Becky. I mean, you're going to watch this later, and yeah, it's great to hear. Yeah, it's great to have your voice in this because yeah, it's where it all starts. We're going to go straight to our sort of first official talk of today, which is our Shemakes partner and project lead, Dr. Marion Rill. She's a systemic design researcher exploring co-creation processes in the territorial transformations to its circular economies and cosmopolitan localism. She's currently working at FabLab Barcelona at IEC. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey working with Marion as part of the Shemakes, and she will talk you now all through what's been done in the Shemakes and what really is this project. So bear with me and I'm gonna share you her talk.
Hola, hello everyone. I'm Mariana Real. I'm working at FabLab Barcelona inside the Institute of Advanced Architecture of Catalonia. So we are partner of the Shemakes project, and I'm working with my colleague Anastasia Pistopoulou in facilitating this wool research. I'm super happy today to present the Wool Mondays and what has been happening during the month of May within the Shemakes labs. So first, this Wool Monday come from a lab-to-lab project, which are seen as open resource space to foster collaborative research across labs. And we have decided to choose the wool topic beyond many other topics that were interested in us. But first, because it's a local natural resource, there is different fiber according to the context, and it's a really nice fiber that we can dye and that we can make color with and that we can process with different machines. And most of all, what we wanted to do with the wool project is to look at local community who wish to reshape local value chains around wool, as we expect to do in our lab, and work with farmers, spinner, weaver, maker, designer, waste management center, upcycling center, and other places that are involved in the value chain. So to work with them and to see what are the challenges locally and how Textile Lab, Fab Lab can help to boost and to sustain such practice. So what we have been doing is to develop 3 different projects under the wider topic of wool, which is place, design, and make. So we have been looking at ecosystem mapping, natural dyeing, and DIY tool making. So after like several months of research with the VAG Amsterdam team, the Redu Romanian team, and Fab Lab Barcelona team, exploring different aspects of the wool, we have been creating this Wool Monday events in collaboration with new labs who joined the project, including Center for Secular Design, Green Fabric, Icelandic Textile Center, the Farm Lab. And we have designed it as an hybrid event to rethink wool through exchange and experimentation. So it was 3 dates, the 2nd of May, the 16th of May, and the 23rd of May, to work independently on the different 3 topics: wool ecosystem, coloring wool, and wool open source tools. Let's go on this journey. I propose you to discover what happened first in the wool ecosystem workshop. So this workshop was about place and wool. So this working group aimed to look for better understanding of local dynamic and challenging, looking at the systemic view by being inside regarding the process of wool. And what has been done during the workshop is to present the European context thanks to geographical mapping and a series of testimony from all the labs. And after that, we have been doing some co-creation activity in Miro to foster synergy, identify gaps and opportunity. So here you have a view of the current ecosystem mapping with different type of stakeholder. You can zoom in, zoom out. It's an open source map, so you can also fit it, especially today with the UK context. And here, like another view of all the story, but I really recommend you to look at and listen to the story of each of the labs. We have been looking at the farm labs. It's a place where we have really a real context here because there is some sheep inside the lab and they are looking at different stakeholders around, talking with them, walking with them to process their wool. With the VAG team in Amsterdam, we not only look at colors, but we also look at the emotion and the character of the sheep. We have also a nice testimony from Sane Moise, which has transformed her life to become a shepherd recently. Super nice in history, and we learned a lot from her. We also have seen many sheep during the presentation. For instance, we saw the Icelandic sheep, which you can see on the left, which are super nice. We have seen with the Icelandic Textile Center all the tradition and the process of sorting wool. For instance, many heritage from this place. We also look at a bunch of projects from the Fibre Academy students, especially in Barcelona, with the project of Lara Campos, Be Grounded, and also Petra Garajova, which is an ambassador of Shemakes this year and work on waste wool. And she worked on 2 projects, one with 3D printing and another one where she really do the process of keratin extraction, which is super impressive when you look at the picture. We also worked with and listened to some labs who just initiate their research and their activity in wool, doing some pedagogical activity, also in the mountain, for instance, with the Decode lab in the Greek context. We have been looking at a workshop in the Alps. Also, we have been exploring different local ecosystem there, like the Association des Friston Moutons. And in Romania, we have been looking at specifically two different designers who worked with wool. So you can see the sweater on the left, on the right top, and also this nice piece of art of Juana Tudose in Romania. You can see this nice felting approach. At the end, we had nice testimony with Lotto Zero and the Center for Circular Design, who really sensibilized us about the complexity of recycling wool and the complexity of the fiber and the mix of fiber. And it was really interesting to have this big overview. So many testimony that came now to us to the second day. The second day was about coloring. So coloring, give color with wool and natural plants. The idea of the group is to create an archive of knowledge around natural dyes and wool. And it's like a repository that can grow with its community of practitioners. So it's an evolving knowledge. We have been testing various techniques from eco-printing, hot, solar, bath dyes with different plants, and you can look in your context what kind of plants you have, so you can see what kind of color you can do with. There was 3 types of workshop proposed during that day: the botanical dyes, the wood and bark dyes, and the eco-printing one. Each interesting because different artifacts also were involved. Botanical dye with fiber, wood and bark dye was done on yarn, and eco-printing on fabric. Here you can see Cecilia Responti was leading this workshop in Amsterdam, and some video from the Farm Lab and the Redu team, who was proposing to participants some tutorial also online and for some on-site. Let's come to day 3 with the Little Wool Factory workshop and the make part of the wool research. And here is the Little Wool Factory concept. Just imagine what is a Little Wool Factory for you, and it's already a great exercise. For us, we see that there is different scale, but what we wanted to do is to create a database of open access tools and machines for imagining laboratory scale micro factory, reviving lost skills and enabling local wool ecosystem. All of what's happened also is based on the Fibre Academy module, open source hardware from fiber to fabric, and we'll feed also this module. So we look at different scale of tools: craft and handy tool, industrial machine, and also the power of digital fabrication and new technology to see what could be adapted more appropriate in each places. So we can also have this expression that one size does not fit all. Yeah. What we have been doing is to map all the steps from farm to fiber, to look at how to make yarn, how to make fabric, how to making it circular, looking at the different steps. And we know that different steps means different tools and machines. So we were looking at the different process, simplifying a bit, and looking at different tools. So cutting, spinning, weaving, felting, crafting, and we look also some tools for circular making. So in a nutshell, the Wool Monday have been 3 days in May, 16 parallel events, online and local, 9 labs involved to strengthen the inter-lab research collaboration. Not only collaboration between labs, but also with new local stakeholders and international network. We have been creating open source knowledge, including a one wool ecosystem map in progress and in collaboration with the European Wool Foundation, a handbook with a series of tutorials and workshops to be replicated that we recommend you to go to see. And globally, we have a better understanding of the current research gap and new opportunity for collaboration. Here is the handbook. And thanks a lot for listening, and look forward to see what's coming next.
Great. That was a wonderful presentation from Marion. Thank you so much. There's so much more done during this project. So do have a look at what's been said, what's been done, which kind of workshops can you join in, and maybe there's something in there that you'd like to join next time, or maybe you can catch up on one of the previous recordings. In the next few speakers, we'll go from region-specific sheep breeds to community-driven craft and technologies. We'll be exploring wool as a material, the processes involved, and the current and potential applications, understanding protein-based fibre context, 60 British wool breeds and local knowledge and craftsmanship in India, and taking that right back to the UK again, which you'll see soon. These are the speakers of this particular session, including myself, which I'm not going to highlight who I am. I've already introduced myself. Well, for the people that join in later, I'm Sana Visser. I'm a PhD researcher at the Centre for Circular Design. And then next up, we'll have Dr. Zoe Fletcher. She's a researcher and founder of The Woolist. She has a background in knitwear design and academic research, focusing on knit experimentation using natural fibres. And then we have Soumya Singh, who is currently doing her MA Biodesign at Central St. Martin's. Can't be here today because she's really busy finishing up her final project. She's a designer and researcher having worked with local craftsmen in India, and then has reflected that back on what kind of work she can do with wool in the UK. So that's a really nice sort of mixture of what's been done in the UK and how does that relate to different countries as well. So hope you enjoy the next few talks, and please don't forget to use the Miro link at these How Might We questions. Like you might think of other questions while you see these really amazing inspirational projects. So do keep those thoughts going. And nothing is a wrong answer, so don't feel pressured. And I'm going to share the next few talks. Bear with me. That was not the right talk. 1 second. Let's see. Hope you can all see that. Hi, my name is Sana Visser, and I'm a material design researcher and maker, currently doing my PhD at the Centre for Circular Design at Chelsea College, and I also run my own practice, Studio Sana Visser. Today I'm very excited to open the session of materials as part of the Circular Wool UK event that we are organising. My talk, Wool Material Matters, will set the context of what material are we talking about, and to provide you with a brief overview of woolen materials, processes and applications in the UK. Following on from this, there will be a series of talks that will go much deeper into the subject of materials and processes. From hair to wool. Since 2016, I've been working with human hair waste as a material to reuse, recycle, and to regenerate in order to create new materials and products, as some of you might know. My PhD focuses on this specific material in order to understand how it could fit into a circular bioeconomy through the use of participatory and interdisciplinary design methods. Whilst it focuses on this particular and quite peculiar material, or waste stream or resource, as I like to refer to it, it sits within the wider context of protein fibres. And this leads me quickly to the conversation of wool. Both fibres are of similar chemical composition. Not only do they share similar characteristics, it is an interesting comparison if you want to understand the scale and systems too. Through research, I found that human hair currently generates 6.5 million kilograms of waste in the UK annually. By 2050, it will generate 1 million tonnes globally every year. This is nearly the same amount of fibre as current wool production, an increase due to our increased world population. During my current residency at the Design Museum in London, of which, by the way, the exhibition Restore will be opening next week on the 24th of June, I've engaged even more closely with both systems, particularly focusing on the stages of collecting, sorting, grading, and cleaning. By observing these existing systems or infrastructures, such as the wool industry, it'll help me better understand how this could further inform design decisions when working with hair. Before we want to understand how wool can become circular in the UK, it is important to know what the current situation is within the wider global fibre industry. As a majority of the people in this room, let alone today's speakers, this might be common language. I'm going to say it anyway. According to the Textile Exchange report, wool had a market share of around 1% with a global production volume of around 1 million tonnes. Whilst wool has been declining in production quite a few decades, it is noticeably that there is a regained interest in the use of wool after speaking to different people in the industry, including wool designers, graders, and sorters. To take a closer look into the current UK context of wool, we know that we have 33 million sheep in the UK, around 45,000 sheep farmers, 60 different breeds, if we're not counting the crossbreeds, producing 70,500 tonnes of wool each year, and of this, 50% stays within UK borders. The other half is exported to other countries and continents, including Europe and China. According to the National Sheep Association, current British wool is applied into different applications into a variety of industries. Around 50% is applied in carpets, 25% into knitwear, 14% in cloth, 7% in bedding, and 2% in other products. Soon we will learn from our speakers the challenges and opportunities that different breeds in the UK give us and how this shapes the processes and applications used. Apart from more common applications like the carpets and clothing we had a closer look at what else is happening in the UK wool landscape. These are just a few examples of UK-based products that have been developed using wool, ranging from recycled wool for textiles by Inuit, to interior objects, insulation, composting, and packaging for both medical and food. What is interesting about these products and developments that they share circular design and sustainable thinking, from mechanical recycling to creating biodegradable composites and end-of-life purposes. Talking about materials and processes, we need to understand the full landscape in order to make and use wool truly circular. I'm sure there's more questions that will rise after today, but questions that came up to my mind and doing my field research as part of this project included what materials applications are yet to be uncovered, where do the opportunities lie, what are the industries, which traditional processes and techniques are used now, and which ones are forgotten or undervalued and could be revived, what new technologies exist and could be implemented, and how can we extend the life of wool using circular design principles. To finish my talk, Wool Material Matters, I'd like to highlight a few organisations that play a key role in the UK wool landscape, including the Campaign for Wool, British Wool Marketing Board, Circular Economy Innovation Network, and the Fibre Shed UK. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the future talks.
Hi, my name's Zoe Fletcher and I'm a British wool researcher and maker. I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about my PhD research, which was called Designing for Breed. So my research set out to create a British sheep breed database that made accessible practical knowledge of breed characteristics and the histories and narratives surrounding them, the associated provenance, ultimately kind of aimed at aiding designers, craftspeople, people working with British wool in their search for information on raw materials, but also adding value to this underutilised material. culminating in, it was a practice-based PhD, so culminating in a design-orientated toolkit that really started to kind of showcase the different understandings of purebred British wool for knitwear and other users of wool. So some of the aims were that I wanted to kind of experiment with new knitwear technologies that push the boundaries of conventional British wool use, but also enabled us to investigate British sheep breed characteristics that really start to kind of enable designers to make informed decisions on the different qualities that were available, but also that started to really value the heritage of wool, the specific geographical locations that sheep have been bred over for generations, but within a contemporary practice to add value, not just monetary value, lots of different types of values to an underutilized fibre. Wool itself is amazing. It's dirt resistant, wicks away water, it's hypoallergenic, UV protection and fire resistant, and it's never been able to be fully replicated by synthetics. But currently it's overshadowed by profitable meat production, and it's now kind of a byproduct, and it's not being fully utilised in the textile industry. And 100% wool is fantastic. However, within that, there's over 60 different breeds of sheep which are reared in Britain by over 45,000 farmers. And all these breeds have very different characteristics that can be utilised and are not being fully utilised at the moment. So the British Wool Board is one of the, it was set up as a members board, and it was established in 1950 to achieve the best possible return for farmers. They hold a great resource. There's a lot of farmers that absolutely love them, a lot of farmers that have a few disagreements. However, they hold a lot of data surrounding all these different breeds, and they characterise them into different categories, so fine, medium, cross, Leicester, hill, mountain, and naturally coloured. And I chose to study all of them apart from the cross. So I studied 72 breeds, and then there's hundreds of cross breeds. But to build the foundations and lay the foundations for the different characteristics, I decided to look into these 6 base ones. So just a really simplified example of the sorting procedure of British wool at the moment is that the sheep are reared by the farmers, and they're sheared by the farmers or by external shearers. The wool, the fleece is then sent to a local collection site, and which is either graded there or goes to one of the national facilities where it's sorted and graded into over 120 different grades. It's then baled into the grades and core tested and sold at monthly auctions. What I wanted to really look into is what a designer needed and how we could start to kind of look into how these distinctive qualities consciously kind of utilize the possibilities arising from the different inherent aspects. So the luster, how the dye takes to it, the sheen on it, the crimp structure, so for the elasticity, the staple length, meaning it can be utilized in different methods of production, so woolen spun, worsted spun, different felting capabilities, the colour, so the dyeability of it and how to offset that, and utilize kind of commercial level characteristics, so the micron count, the staple length and such like, but also that integrates this amazing kind of narrative that we have behind it as well. And when I started kind of researching, this was kind of the data that was available. And as a designer with limited time and with monetary constraints and new collections coming out, you really needed to kind of simplify it slightly, because if you don't know what colour YD65 or colour YZ means, you can't really start to unpick why a product is pilling, why 100% wool is acting in a certain way, unless you know the different breeds that have gone into it. And I wanted to add value to it in another way as well. So the kind of the farmers that are raising the sheep, how this adds value through regenerative farming, through the way that they treat the land, through the way that they treat their animals as well. And so I took quite a lot of kind of information with me to different shows and started to kind of take samples of yarns, of different breed specific yarns that I'd collected, and really start to build this kind of library, this dictionary of words and knowledge that farmers use, that makers use, that designers use, and how we can kind of compound that into a useful database. So as I said before, kind of integrating that heritage with new technology, with the different qualities of the different sheep breeds, and using these kind of powerful connections to increase the desirability of British wool, all under the umbrella of academic research. So looking into kind of the integral breed characteristics at the centre, but looking into how industry and marketing utilize British wool, how kind of technology can aid it, how sustainability and craft and the handmade can start to have an impact, all under the umbrella of design research. And as I said before, kind of the importance of connecting with a lot of different makers and users, what dyers need to know, what buyers need to know, and utilizing and bridging those gaps of knowledge. And documenting and displaying it in different ways. So taking it right from microscopic level to look and analyze those scale structures through to kind of using new technologies. So using the Shema software, the Shema CKSDS1 Apex 3, to kind of scan in the yarns, create a digital database, be able to work and utilize these without actually using up any precious resources, because a lot of kind of waste is generated with sampling. So we can utilize and see how it reacts in different gauges, different stitches, slightly generalized. However, it would give a better overview and less wastage overall. And just informing the viewer as well, so just laying them side by side, showing visualizing the real differences between each breed. So one wool jumper made out of herdwick will act and feel and have properties very, very different to an Exmoor horn, for example. And as I said before, the software kind of allows you to manipulate, to kind of experiment with different gauges. So some of the outcomes of my research were a visual kind of representation of the different 72 breeds that I analysed. So kind of a sheep in a field can look very much like another one, but actually they all have very distinct qualities, from kind of the Roman nose of the blue-faced Leicester through to kind of the regal nature of the Teeswater, which is very different to kind of the bulldog nature of a Textile or a Beltex. I collected 72 samples of finished yarns, some of them that I couldn't actually find already spun up. I gathered the raw fleeces and took it through to the spinning stage and had someone spin it for me, so I can take this tactile knowledge around and people can feel them themselves. I then knitted up little swatches out of the different samples and laid them side by side to really start this comparative tool. I documented everything on my journey, on my research journey, through to kind of going to the grading centres, going to different producers, using different software, showing why I use different quality signatures in different ways, creating kind of a toolkit of aesthetically pleasing and things that drew people in to want to find out more about why one sheep looked very different to another and what the different yarn qualities were, and documented all this month by month in diaries. And I kind of challenged myself. I wanted it to, there's a lot of knowledge surrounding each breed, however, compiling that onto one A4 sheet that took into account the kind of commercial data needed that is necessary for some designers and makers, however also took into account kind of some background knowledge and the narrative behind it, the microscopic scale structures, and to kind of really start to integrate all this knowledge together. If they wanted to find out more as well, you could then start to scoop a little deeper and compiled kind of books that included kind of the breed society information and all these different little bits, just in a little bit more detail. And it kind of culminated in an exhibition of practical work that I took around to different places, and this is in Manchester School of Art, along with a digital database of a virtual yarn library that compiled all these different fibres, and a website, so you can go and visit it now at thewoolist.co.uk, and that compiles all the different breed knowledge, and there's 72 of them, so it's being added to day by day. It's an ever-evolving resource. Hopefully in the next kind of couple of months I'll start connecting up with the different farmers and different users and different people using different wools. But at the moment kind of it allows anyone using wool to kind of go from looking broadly at the 70 different breeds. If they wanted specific qualities, say for example the handle or the colour, they could then filter it down from 72 breeds through to 7 breeds or 4 breeds. I've taken this kind of tacit toolkit around. So I was the Wool Research Station at Edinburgh Yarn Festival in 2019. People could touch and feel all the different hanks of yarn and really start to interact with this knowledge database. Working with different designers and creating swatch samples for designers to test with. using the wool in with different mediums as well, so embroidery, homewares, and really exciting kind of coming together with an amazing lady, Maria Benjamin, who her and her partner run a regenerative farm over near Ulverston, and we've come together to create the Wool Library, which hopes to kind of facilitate transparent field to yarn practices that values regenerative farming principles, and create a real kind of hub for enabling sourcing and creation of yarn and knitwear with breed specific British wool that's carefully sourced directly from farmer friends and is fully traceable back to the field. Almost like a new kind of radical wool merchant that kind of it's going to be a digital kind of website that's hopefully launching soon. We've had a really successful Kickstarter that was fully funded in a matter of days, that's allowing us to get to that next stage to work with different British manufacturers and experiment with different fibres and bring these kind of new experimentations out and educate and re-educate designers and makers and users of wool into how to utilize wool to its best of its capabilities. So through kind of blending, working with like-minded production partners, working with different fibres and blending them together to get the best qualities out of them, sampling and utilizing kind of yarn knit experimentation to bring out desired qualities, working with different partners, testing them in commercial production, as well as working with brands and taking them through the whole journey as well, from the raw fibres, working them through the whole process to these amazing garments that they've designed and made. So that is me up to date. Thank you so much for listening to me, and please do follow the Woolist and the Wool Library to find out more about us. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Soumya Singh, and I'm here to talk about my work with wool in India and my engagement with wool in the UK. Starting off, I'm going to talk about a project that I worked on with Khmer, a local NGO which works with local craft communities of Kutch, which is based in Gujarat. The project was the Desyun Revival project. Desyun translates to local wool. The project was about understanding the problems within the local value chain and what were the challenges and why was the local wool being dumped instead of being used, and sort of bridging those gaps between the different communities which were traditionally using wool. To give you a local and traditional context of the material, it was used in many ingenious ways where the different techniques were suitable to the material. It isn't very delicate. It is quite coarse and strong, and also suitable for the nomadic nature of the pastoral communities of the region. It was woven with, it was felted to create a range of products like accessories, like bags, carpets, ground seaters, garments which are worn by many communities of the region. The climate is very harsh and hot, and to safeguard the material against pest infestation, a wild onion called varat was used to starch the warp threads and spread evenly by the brush called kalori. This provided strength to the yarn and also helped fight pest infestations into the material. There were many different links established, close links established with the shepherding community, the shearing community, the spinners, and the weavers to understand the challenges which were faced by them. There were a lot of meetings which were conducted to understand and implement animal welfare principles, working with the shearing community to get a larger staple length, because now the fiber was not being shown to be thrown away, but for use in textiles. There were a range of workshops which were organized by Khmer, the organization, but they were conducted by the elderly women of the Rabari community who were expert spinners and know the material very well. Because the material And the wool in the region is quite hardy and sturdy. It has a coarse feel to it. There were a lot of blending exercises which were done at different levels, at carding stage, at spinning stage, and on the woven, on the loom. There were different sampler blankets which were made with different drafts and denting variations to get different swatches and understand varying fields with different natural fibers which were sourced from the country itself, and with local organic cotton grown in Kutch, which is a rain-fed local cotton variety. One of the other projects that I'd worked on was with Kulbi Wims, which is a self-help group based in Nagar, in Kullu Valley in Himachal Pradesh, which is up north. And the project was to develop textiles with the local wool. The group used to, and it does traditionally practice knitting, weaving, crocheting, and natural dyeing, which is traditionally passed down from generation to generation. But there were again broken links with the shepherding communities, which is where it was an incredible project where the group again got in touch with shepherding communities, started sourcing their local wool, and we developed a range of textiles which were inspired by their traditional garments called a pattu. So you can see that there are repeating elements of a border on the side, a certain pattern which would move along the edge. All colors achieved here are using natural ingredients foraged from around their valley. Going back to a traditional local material also meant going back to traditional methods of weaving, using wooden reeds to be able to accommodate the texture of a hand-spun yarn, and plying the yarn using a technique called masain to have enough tension and strength on the warp. I'm going to talk about some of my exploration and engagement with UK wool. I visited a farm in Lincoln and met this young farmer called Phoebe, and tried to understand what were the challenges that she faced as a small scale farmer. Also did some visits in Scotland and got a good amount of of wool from just collecting wool which was stuck in shrubs and on the field. Also visited Rye as part of a preliminary research for my master's in biodesign. Did a couple of experiments with bioplastics, agar and gelatin to be able to use the waste wool which was being dumped by the farmers and burnt in certain cases as well. This seemed like an opportunity to see if the wool could be processed on the farm itself. So I started doing different experiments with mycelium, where I had different swatches which were woven and knotted and sort of inoculated mycelium in them. And as you can see, they grew well, and the experimentations are still in progress to understand the end use applications of the material. I also put wool, which is protein based, along with cellulose based waste streams to understand if that affected the growth rate of the mycelium, which it did. I also recently visited the Fleetliners city farm in Islington Borough and witnessed a demonstration which was organized for students and acquired their fleece. I also used the wool which was acquired from Elsa, the sheep who was sheared that day, and conducted a spinning workshop as part of the Festival of Natural Fibers, which I'm associated with. As part of Festival of Natural Fibers, I'm associated as a consultant with Khadi London. The festival had different workshops, exhibitions, demonstrations, and a lot of interesting conversations around the natural fibers of UK and India, and how different synergies can be brought together from India in the context of UK, and trying to understand where there are gaps. which could be worked on. And I'm excited to engage more with the material. Which brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was useful in some way. Thank you.
That was a great series of presentations. Really amazing to see yeah, how we go from understanding the UK landscape all the way to how we use our hands to make work with wool, understanding the craftsmanship in different locations, and how that works. I'm just going back to the presentation again. And the next two speakers before we going on a small comfort break is looking at the felting and weaving to UK-based leading industry players. We're really excited to hear more from Josie Steed talking about Harris Tweed and Stephanie Rolfe working at Doppelhaus for their clout wool material. So first up will be Josie Steed. She's a senior lecturer and design researcher at Grace School of Art, Robert Gordon University. And Stephanie Rolfe is the R&D project lead for the BF Business Fashion Technology and Textiles with Doppelhaus. So really excited yeah, to hear more focusing on industry and how that works on that level.
Hello, I'm Josie Steed. I'm a senior lecturer and researcher at Grace School of Art in Aberdeen, Robert Gordon University in Scotland, in fashion and textiles design. Thank you so much to the organisers for inviting me to talk at this special Circular Wool UK event about a recent research project I'm involved with that explores design innovation to minimise and manage wool waste and explore environmental processes by introducing circularity principles into the Harris Tweed industry. The project is a 2-year knowledge transfer partnership funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council and Innovate UK, with the company Harris Tweed Hebrides that explores sustainable product development to provide year-round and sustainable business demand for the Harris Tweed Hebrides brand and the home weaver industry on the Isles of Lewis and Harris. Firstly, to provide some background and context, Harris Tweed is a global leader of luxury woolen textiles that is directly connected to the history of the Outer Hebrides, a group of islands off the west coast of Scotland. They are made up of more than 70 islands, of which only 15 are inhabited, with Lewis and Harris being the most northerly and populated of the islands. Harris Tweed supports a community of home weavers and is integral to the region's economy. It is unique, and as such, production against replication has and continues to be protected by the certification of the orb regulated by the Harris Tweed Authority. At a time when the concepts of sustainability, heritage and provenance are central to our lives, Harris Tweed communicates these values through their cloth and its story. Our project partners are Harris Tweed Hebrides, which is the largest mill producing around 65% of all Harris Tweed fabric. The wool used is Teviot, is produced by Teviot sheep, and the company uses this virgin Teviot sheep where all the preparatory processes except scouring are all done in their mill in Lewis. The company employs its commissioning partners, around 140 individual home weavers, where all hand weaving is made on a treadle loom. The fleece is processed fully in-house into coloured yarns and warps, which are then transported across the islands to the weavers' homes. Once woven, the cloth is then collected and finished at the mill, where it doesn't leave the mill until it has been inspected and authenticated and stamped by the Harris Tweed Authority. Throughout the process, Harris Tweed Authority documentation follows the warp right through to final fabric. The company's fabric is sold and used for a wide range of products for interiors, fashion and accessories, and has been showcased by major international fashion brands such as Ralph Lauren, Chanel and Vivienne Westwood, and more recently by brands such as Thom Browne and Stone Island. Our project specifically focuses on sustainability through new product development and developing an innovation culture within the business. And this is being explored through 3 different lenses, namely sustainable product development, using design innovation to minimize and manage wool waste, exploring environmentally friendly options and processes to introduce circular economy principles into their business operations, and innovation, developing a strategy for access to new markets and for increasing production of other ranges, specifically for the spring-summer market or non-seasonal products, which is more challenging for the business. And developing an innovation-led design approach within the business, including a strategy for open innovation using a variety of the company's new and existing partners and stakeholders. The ultimate aim of the project being to generate year-round sustainable business demand for the brand and the home weaver industry on the Isles of Lewis and Harris, together with establishing the brand's position in relation to the growing legislation and consumer focus on sustainability. The increasing focus on sustainability in textile production, currently prevalent in media coverage, government legislation, where consumer demands also for transparency are very much in this, needed within the supply chain. While the company has an excellent story to tell in terms of sustainability of employment in rural communities, their production processes, estate and location are more challenging, where only now these are being fully reviewed through their sustainability map between now and 2050. The company has put in place their sustainability map, which highlights the areas they seek to improve upon. And this is very much a working document, which will take time to implement many of these areas. Harris Tweed Hebrides wants to share their sustainability credentials with their customers more fully. And there are 2 stories in support of sustainable textile products. One is circularity, focusing on creating a product that can be disposed of naturally or recycled into a new product or garment. And the other is to provide a quality product that will last for many years with the correct care, mending and repairing. And this is more commonly known as buy less, buy better, where consumers are encouraged to buy a high quality, long lasting product over fast fashion alternatives. One of the areas that we're exploring is the use of natural undyed yarns to create natural tweed ranges. This work is the first for the Harris Tweed industry and has the potential to open up new opportunities. Another area in development is the effect chemicals used in production have on dyed wool, its biodegradability and any effects it could have on the environment. One of the main selling points of wool as a natural fibre is that it is 100% biodegradable. Harris Tweed Hebrides is concerned that using this statement without more information on the decomposition of dyed wool could be misleading and perceived as a form of greenwashing. Preliminary research carried out indicates that there is a knowledge gap in this area, and work is currently underway to work on a further project to develop this further. The project will complete early 2023 and we'll be presenting and disseminating the project's findings more widely very shortly. And this is part of our process being involved in this event today. Thanks very much for listening. And if you would like more information on the project, please do get in touch with me. There are also links below to the Harris Tweed Hebrides website and our recent publication, which focuses on Harris Tweed as a global case study. Thank you very much.
Hi, so I'm going to talk to you today about the Repatriate project, a farm to fabric project I worked on with the Business of Fashion, Textiles and Technology Partnership and Doppelhaus. So firstly, to introduce myself, I am Stephanie Rolfe, a textile designer, lecturer and researcher. I've been working with the Business of Fashion, Textiles and Technology Partnership for the last 2.5 years on different commercial research projects. So Doppelhaus are an innovative non-woven materials company with a strong R&D ethos, challenging what you can create and use non-wovens for. They have developed and successfully commercialized woolen non-wovens for apparel with their pioneering cloud wool quality. The BFTT and Doppelhaus entered into a commercial academia partnership to develop sustainable non-woven materials at affordable price points. So in their own words, high quality, low cost. Born out of a desire to put pure local fibers back onto the market in new and exciting forms, cloud wool is a natural innovation made using 100% local wool that would normally go to waste. This noble natural fiber is bonded with non-woven technology to create a super soft and durable fabric that doesn't cost the earth. So when I joined the project, Doppelhaus had already created a really clear and ambitious aim of designing and developing a pure British wool non-woven fabric for the fashion industry with wide market appeal. And this fabric was to adhere to Doppelhaus's 4 pillars of sustainability, performance, scalability, and commercial viability. So really thinking that the research was within a commercial frame and that everything produced within the BFTT project needs to be in line with the budget and performance standards that would ensure commercial viability of the product when it went to market. So from a research point of view, I wanted to really satisfy these commercial aims, but using a research framework, thinking of research questions that could expand and enrich the overall product outputs. So how could we meet and exceed Doppelhaus's commercial desires, but also explore sustainability further? So Doppelhaus had specified British wool, so thinking of the region of Britain. But we were able to work with them to expand this out to deliver farm to fabric traceability. So the motivation between working really with farmers rather than just British wool in general was that it allowed us to create a traceable and transparent supply chain. And this in turn led us to be able to create a more circular textile through this traceability. So as I mentioned, I am a textile designer as well as a researcher, and I came to this project having spent the last 10 years producing woven fabrics with various wool qualities, but having quite a limited experience of working with wool fibers. So at the start of this project, we decided to work with 100% wool because it allowed us to create a monomaterial that would either be biodegradable at end of life or recyclable mechanically. However, there's also the limitations on monomaterial in terms of performance and just the toolkit you have to work with. So at the start of the project, we really wanted to understand the broad spectrum of what wool is in terms of British wool. So on screen, you can see just 6 of the many breeds of British sheep. I think there's over 300. And these breeds, I think, characterize really different qualities. You can see longer and short hair, coarse and fine. And it really is about understanding that within this monomaterial, we still have a vast range of options. There's really hundreds of materials within this monomaterial. And this really got us thinking about how and where we source our British wool and how do we have access to these different breeds. So the initial mapping of UK wool fibre capability led us to the British Wool Board. So this is traditionally how wool is sourced in the UK, and it's at large scale with commercial processors. This wasn't really in line and didn't allow us to get farm to fabric traceability. So we began mapping other wool UK capabilities. So talking to smaller wool agents, cooperatives, so groups of farmers that work together to sell their flocks, independent growers, and wool recyclers. So you can see from the interactive map, we were able to really locate and start to understand our possible supply chains. Once we had developed this capability, we then really needed to understand the appetite of UK brands for traceable local British wool. And this really highlighted to us that working with brands is vital in creating a route to market for a really misunderstood fabric. So how could we develop a wool that was at the right price point, because brands often assume it's too expensive? And also, how can we make a material that has really strong performance qualities? So not only is it natural and traceable, but it will last a long time within these garments. So we worked with 3 different British brands. You can see one on screen who are already a customer of Doppelhaus, who worked with us on developing a material that would suit a woman's wear fabric, but using 100% wool fabric. So we now had a kind of industry expectation. We had resourced our toolkit. So we were then moving on to prototyping. So working initially with academic prototyping facilities and then scaling this to pilot runs with industrial partners, we were able to develop new qualities of cloud wool with improved performance. So within this work, we also needed to map UK manufacturing, in particular for wool. So processing, non-woven and finishing capabilities, as well as transportation and logistics. And we really began to understand how uniquely placed the UK is, because of its wool history, to really create this localized textile. The facilities we have here mean that it's something that we really can do. It also highlighted some of the limitations and opportunities, and we were able to work within these parameters to create a collection of British wool textiles. So these are just some of our final industrially produced outputs. And you can see here we were able to work with different breeds of wool, work with different colors, so to create a naturally tonal collection. So in Doppelhaus's own words to finish: naturable, breathable, comfortable. We believe that working with nature, not against it, gives the best results long term. We've embedded all of wool's natural properties into our materials to make it the best it can be. This approach makes cloud wool naturally lightweight and dense, offering a feeling of comfort without the heaviness, so you can breathe easy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Steph and Josie, for coming on and talking us through to your projects. That's been such an amazing insights, and it brought already questions to me, like how would sort of smaller individual design studios access some of this machinery, or how would we open this up? And yeah, I can't wait to see what other brands Doppelhaus would work with and how that kind of picks up. I mean, I can talk about this for a long time, and I won't. I'll want to give you a 10-minute comfort break. So we'll be back in the room at 11:25 UK time. I really hope everyone's enjoying the talks so far. It's been so inspiring to see everything. If you do have any questions, I'm finding it hard to keep track of the chat box, as I'm also obviously broadcasting other videos. So I'll catch up on that now. But we will have a 10-minute break, so we'll see you shortly. I'll be in the background, but I'll be on mute and my video off. So we'll see you soon. Do message me directly on the chat, and please use the Miro as well. It's a great way of sharing ideas together. See you in 10 minutes. Right, I hope everyone had a really short mini break. We will be going back to our screen. Let's see, is it time? Actually, show my time on screen. I think give it 1 more minute, people to get back into the room. Right, I think we're ready. Hope everyone feels stretched, excited, and ready for the next second half of today's session. It's been super inspiring so far, and yeah, the next few speakers are interlinked 3 presentations, and it will be I can't see because things are blocking my view, but hopefully I can manage. Multimodal research approaches for exploring the potential of sustainable wool for innovation. It will be highlighting archival materials investigations of historical wool artifacts, technologically driven laboratory testing, and textiles engineering, and theoretical approaches to wool as a communal human resource for multiple stakeholders. That sounds super promising. I'm really excited to share the works of 3 amazing speakers. Dr. Claire Leopinia, who is on the talk today as well, and who will be speaking at the end of the event. Hope everyone can hear me all right, because my screen might be freezing. She is an associate professor of sustainable textiles at De Montfort University. Dr. Angela Davies is a senior lecturer, textile and garment technology, also at De Montfort University. And then we have Jennifer Durantel, a PhD researcher at the same university. It'll be super exciting to hear about the research being done more closely with wool in multiple angles. So we're really excited to hear from you more, and I'll start sharing my screen. It will allow me. Right. That's the wrong presentation. It's right. Right, hope you can all see that and enjoy the talks, and yes.
Hello, I'm Dr. Claire Leopinia. I'm an Associate Professor of Sustainable Textiles at De Montfort University in Leicester, and I'm here to talk to you today about our Textiles Engineering and Materials Research Group and the work that we do, particularly around wool. So we take a multimodal research approach. We investigate sustainable technologies and technologies that can improve garment durability, wet processing, every point on the supply chain really of a garment. And a textile and a fibre, through incorporating design, technology, material culture, and as well as your traditional science and textile engineering and chemistry as well. So it's really about thinking how we use a range of different types of experts in order to break out of silos, and that by doing this we can, in improving the connections between different disciplines, we can not only institute sustainable practices across the industry, but we can start to really have an impact with our research in the world. So our research group is led by Professor Jin-Son Shen. He is a chemist and engineer and incredibly expert at all stages of textile production and processing. The work that he's given me to share with you today is based around enzymes and some of the bioprocesses which are developed in order to improve and enhance the natural qualities and performances of the wool fibre. So here, on the right, the development of enzyme using a sol gel technology is applied to the problem of wool shrinkage. So a fungi-based enzyme is used to modify the wool so it can be machine washed without shrinking or damage to the wool fibre. And this surface coating technology enhances the antimicrobial, antibacterial properties of the wool, its water repellency, its abrasion resistance, and its dimensional stability as well. The work on the left is from a collaborative project with Loughborough University, led by Professor Shen at De Montfort and by Dr. Faith Kane at Loughborough. So this is looking at laser technology for wool coloration and patterning. So really thinking about how to enhance the wool and the appearance of the wool in a way that is more sustainable than traditional wet processing. The work on the right was completed by our PhD student, now graduate, Dr. Nalini Netakamakorn. And it was very interesting and exciting enzyme work, again, using naturally derived fungi enzymes to color wool without any synthetic dye stuff. So she was able to achieve a full gamut of color using the enzymes and adjusting the pH. What was quite interesting about her work was that she was able to dye wool at 30 degrees Celsius, so slightly just above room temperature, rather than boiling it at 100 degrees Celsius for an hour. And the collaborative work that we do with other universities and within our team are really focused on opportunities for textile coloration and surface design using different alternative technologies. Much of the work that Professor Shen does is in the field of wool processing and biotechnological approaches to using enzymes as an alternative for wet textile processing, both pre-treatment and coloration processing. And enzymes are quite an exciting area to work in because they're biodegradable, they're reusable, and they're safe and mild to use. So the interconnections in the field are really an important element that my research and my work deals with. A lot of my personal research is developed on the emotional engagement in the social and cultural world that textile objects inhabit for humans, and how those relationships and how those textiles enable people to exist in their worlds, and the experiential domains that textiles intersect with in our personal engagement with a garment, a personal engagement with the understanding of a fibre. So using this base of my work has led to really thinking about other systems and other connections and networks, and the ways in which we can start to transition towards a circular economy. Our linear fashion system, if we think about it, and this is a model that I put together where I was just doing a chord diagram, exploring some of the different networks and the different players in the wool system, is incredibly complex. So if we're thinking about a linear fashion system, we often think about it as a kind of a straight line, but actually it's quite fractal in nature. Each point on supply chain is more like a spur on a flowchart that goes off in different directions. And as Donella Meadows notes in systems theories, non-linearities produce surprises. So mapping the actors in this dynamic space of a single fibre really helps us to open up beyond a linear point and think about the different relationships. And that's kind of key within my research. So thinking about events and fashion events and a garment or a textile as a culmination of a series of different events that arise within a dynamic system of structures and behaviors. So the problem of creating a sustainable textiles industry, as we know, is the complexity where so many variables obscure rather than illuminate. So these interconnections really are the thing. I found that through my work developing sustainable curricula for students, that by showing them where their beloved garments have come from, what the different systems that flow in and out of that garment are, the human systems, the animal systems, the planetary systems, right back to the soil itself, is a way of kind of introducing the human element, the animal element, the planetary element in a way that students understand. And it's a really interesting conversation to have where you're looking at all those different actors in a system if we're thinking about systems theory. And so these sorts of insights have really enabled my work with industrial partners, allowing me and my colleagues to phrase, some of the opportunities that arise through conversation and connections and interventions with the interplay of design, science, technology, testing, and industry. And it's really quite interesting. Recently, Dr. Davies on the panel today with me And I've been working in Leicester on a community renewal fund project, which is called Leicester Textiles Renewal, which is seen as partner with the social enterprise Fashion Enter and Leicester City Council to offer practical support and innovation to Leicester's fashion SMEs. And it's really about situating all the actors and all the parts of the network together. That's how we will get the innovation and the breakthroughs that we're looking for. And research groups do have a strong role to play here as a nexus for technological explorations within the context of respect for a natural world. Wool is a communal human resource, has multiple stakeholders, including the sheep who produce it. One framework for thinking about these interconnections is transition design. So this is employed by transdisciplinary teams who look at how different biological and natural systems interconnect and the complexity of natural systems. It's biomimetic in nature and that it mimics natural systems. But it really draws upon how these systems sustain themselves over a period of time. In terms of an approach to wool, situating this wonder fibre and its complex textile systems is really key. And I like to borrow from Arturo Escobar's design for conviviality, which is encouraging us to be respectful of each other and the natural world, assuming responsibility for how we live, act, and conduct ourselves in every interaction that we have, not only in our design research, but also in the lab, out in the world, when working with industry. So thank you so much for listening. We welcome inquiries and discussions about our research and collaborations. I must acknowledge some of the collaborators that we've worked with and that particularly Professor Jinson Shen has worked with. He is our team research group leader. You're welcome to come and have a look at our research. We welcome inquiries as well. And then we've got a series of other researchers who we've worked with and who have contributed to this really interesting conversation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Angela Davies and I'm part of the Textile Engineering and Materials Research Group at Montfort University. And I'm going to talk to you today about the circular economy and wool and why textile testing in the laboratory is important for wool production and processing. So if you think about when the sheep has their fleece and think about the process of taking that fleece all the way through from fleece form through to garment production, through to what happens with the consumer and end of life management, textile testing is involved throughout the entire of that process, whether it be looking at the qualities of the fleece all the way through to the properties of the finished garment or product. What do we put on the care label to advise the consumer? And also what happens at the end of that product's useful life. And you'll see testing is involved across the entire of that process. So first, looking at fibre identification. And as you can see in the image, this is an image of wool. But it's very difficult to find using optical microscopy, just simple microscopy, the difference between the different breeds of sheep, but also the difference between animal fibres. So all protein fibres from animals may look quite similar because they'll have scales on the surface. So how do you identify whether it's from a goat or a yak or whether it's from a sheep? So test houses will use a variety of different techniques, such as scanning electron microscopy, mass spectrophotometry, and optical microscopy to look at the different species to verify where it's from, what type of fibre it is. But you can also look at things like fibre diameter as well, and look at the scale height, so the different scales on the surface, how high they are, what angle they're set at, and also the ratio as well. Once we've done the verification, then we can then look at other properties, whether it be the colour assessment of the fleece, so looking at the shade differences, whether it be looking at the diameter of the fibre length, how easily it compresses, but also looking at the fleece itself, so how pure it is. Is there any residual grease on the surface that might cause problems further down the processing line? And I've put on this slide about the International Wool Textile Organisation, which globally monitors the fleeces from sheep, and also looking at how we can be more sustainable in the future and making better use of wool fibre. So once we've looked at the wool fibres in their fibre form, then it's starting to think about what properties the finished fabric might possess. So if you think that wool from a sheep has very good absorption properties, so it's highly amorphous, so it takes in moisture really easily, which can actually be a very good thing because it can offer some moisture managing properties. So it can take that moisture in and move it around on the surface, but also retain it there. And wool is very good at being able to take in a lot of moisture without actually feeling wet to the touch. We can also consider safety as well in the fabric properties. So wool has lower levels of flammability than some other natural fibres. And it's a very good fibre to blend with other cellulosic fibres such as bast fibres. So if you add your protein wool fibre with cellulosic bast fibres, if you put them together, you'll have a product that has very good flammability levels. You also have high insulation as well from wool, so it's very insulating, it keeps you warm, and it's that crimp in the wool fibre that keeps you nice and warm. Wool fibre also has good elasticity as well, which we can measure, and that's due to the folded peptide chains which are incorporated into the wool fibre. Wool itself is very durable. It has a really good abrasion resistance, so it's very hardy and long-lasting. So we can measure all of these properties in the textile testing laboratory. Wool, however, does have some negative properties, and that's where there's been a lot of research into working on how to counteract these negative properties. So as you're aware that wool is very absorbent, which is a really good thing, but can also lead to problems when we put wool in a washing machine. And wool is very well known for shrinking. So it shrinks and swells, it absorbs a lot of moisture, and therefore we need to consider, do we pre-shrink the wool before it's made up into garment form? And that's where we can use shrink-resistant finishes using chemicals to really make sure that that wool stays the size that it should be and doesn't shrink during use. We also need to advise the consumer as well, so making sure that the consumer is aware of how to maintain and look after a wool product. So not putting it on a high temperature wash, not putting it in a high temperature tumble dryer, making sure it's shaped nicely when it's wet, so therefore it doesn't shrink or distort. We also know that wool felts very easily as well, and that's due to the scales on the surface of wool. So there are different treatments that we can use to either remove the scales or mask them so that then that counteracts the felting effect, which is due to mechanical action. Another aspect is moths and beetles really love wool. They're really drawn to it, and that's because of the keratin in the wool fibre. But there are ways that we can then counteract that. So we can use essential oils to really divert the moths and beetles away from being attracted to the wool fibre. Another aspect of wool is sensitivity. So a lot of people have this misconception that wool is very itchy, it's going to irritate your skin. And that's why we can do wool testing to really look at what's called the prickle factor. And that's where we can look at the fibre diameters to make sure that if you've got the right fibre diameter, you've also got a consistent fibre, and that will help to reduce the amount of prickle that the wool fibre will offer. So if you have a coarser fibre and an inconsistent fibre, this will lead to more prickle that occurs. And what we want is someone to be comfortable against the skin. There's also the itch, which people mention, and that's because there is a myth that wool causes allergies, but actually it's down to the prickle. So it's to do with the fibre diameter and the consistency of the fibre. It might also be to do with any chemicals, residual chemicals on the surface, and the wax or any alcohol that may still be present on the woolen fabric. So making sure that we clean the wool so that it is clear from any chemicals, and also making sure we look at this prickle factor can help make sure that the material is nice and soft against the skin. And some woolen fibres, which are very fine, such as merino wool, will actually be a lot softer against the skin. So it really depends on that fibre diameter as to how comfortable that fibre is going to be against your skin. Wool as a fibre contains lanolin, and it's this lanolin that actually people may think causes irritation, but actually it can be a positive thing. Lanolin is very good for those people with dermatitis because it helps reduce water loss and stops the production of dry skin. So it actually can help make your skin feel much softer and more comfortable. So it can actually be a very positive thing to have that lanolin there on the wool fibres and using it against the skin. Longevity. Wool has a really good long life. It's easy to care for, it's long lasting, and there are now advances to make sure that we can provide moth prevention. So it really is a good long lasting fibre. And finally, thinking about the circular economy and wool. Sheep need to be sheared for comfort because they get too hot in the summer. So taking the fleece from the sheep is actually helping maintain the welfare of a sheep. There are then cleaner technologies that are being used for processing wool, which contain a lot of less water, less chemicals in the cleaning, drying and finishing process. Wool as a fibre is biodegradable, so acting as a fertiliser. So when you put the wool fibre back into the ground, it can help fertilise the ground, adding essential nutrients into the ground and really adding in that carbon back into the soil. So it can actually help revive the soil. It uses a lot less energy than some other fibres in production. And also there's a lot of research being done into wool to help really mitigate the production of greenhouse gases, which we're all very much aware of in the production of animal-based fibre. And of course, one final benefit is no plastic pollution. Wool is a natural fibre, so therefore it's not plastic based and therefore contributing to microfibres in the environment. Thank you ever so much for listening.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Durantel, a second-year PhD from De Montfort University. We're all here today because we believe in the incredible potential of wool as a circular material and are excited by all of its qualities, so I won't retread that ground too much. But my multidisciplinary research in wool has taken me on a slightly different path than many here, and I definitely started way out in left field. While teaching and living in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia for 2 years, I became very interested in two things: traditional Mongolian gers, which are felted wool tents stretched over an expandable wooden frame, and in the cultural, economic, and environmental problems facing Mongolia. The problems facing them, wicked problems, are complicated and messy and are causing extreme rural to urban migration, an era of cultural flux, rampant air pollution, and a swelling of unplanned urban areas called ger districts that are now home to nearly 60% of Mongolia's population. As an environmental and textile designer, I saw the potential overlap between these two areas, and that became the basis for my research. I knew wool to be a material with many possible uses, highly exploitable biological and physical properties, and a long cultural backstory in the region. So, spurred on by these factors, I began to frame out several ways of conducting research into the fibers themselves and into their potential as having a larger role in a circular economy within Mongolia. By connecting the threads of contemporary felt making practice back to historical records of felt and felt artifacts, I'm able to situate contemporary Mongolian felt making as an already perfected and efficient process, which should be preserved in any additional material or system interventions. Wool felt has been documented in production and use in Central Asia since the 3rd millennium BCE, and it was so culturally significant that from around the 4th century, the Chinese called the cultures living on the grassland steppes the people of the felt. The Mongol Empire as we know it today rose around the 13th century, and Genghis Khan's warlike expansion over the Eurasian steppes to Eastern Europe spread the Mongols' felt-making practices. Genghis Khan described the Mongols as the generations who live in felt tents and proclaimed that the Mongol nation would cease to be if people stopped living in gers. Today, wool felt is still made in a process that connects back centuries and holds a place of extreme significance in Mongolian culture. Mongolians manually process the wool and hair of 5 kinds of animals for use in their daily life: sheep, horses, camels, goats, and yak. The wool is sheared, washed, and then beaten on the grass with long wooden poles. The new wool is rolled out and felted together with an existing panel of wool. Mongolians refer to this as joining the mother felt with the daughter felt. The daughter felt is built upon the wool of her mother-in-law's ger and that of her mother-in-law's ancestors, creating composite walls that can be up to 10 inches thick. In Mongolian culture, the spirit of the female ancestors is said to reside in the fibers of the felted wool. After the new layer is felted on the old, Water is added and grass is sprinkled on top. It's tightly rolled in soaked hides and bound with horsehair ropes. Mongolian felt making is unique in the use of a camel or horse to drag the bound felt bundle back and forth over the ground to complete the felt making process. Accompanying this are specific rituals, chants, and songs, the drinking of ariak, fermented mare's milk, blessings to the Father Blue Sky, and community-wide feasting. The resulting felt from this process, because it's laid haphazardly together and then felted through dragging rather than by a human hand agitating the felt in one or two directions, results in a more multi-directional felt where the fibers are not aligned, and in some instances may also utilize animal locks that are already twined together and matted. This can be confirmed by examining the fibers under a typical compound microscope, where the relationship between fibers can be seen. The specific process of felting impacts the technical qualities of the finished felts. Running a series of technical textile tests, I was able to determine that this felt is unusually insulative and more heat and water resistant as compared to other types of wool textiles and factory-made felt. I then used this process to examine the fibers on artifacts and wool fragments held in the British Museum from a 4th century Silk Road cache. Once again, by understanding the specific techniques which make felt making in Central Asia unique, I was able to confirm the same qualities were present in these artifacts. This underpins the significance of the felt making from a historical perspective, but more importantly, it confirms that the technical qualities that result from this style of felt making have been refined and intentionally exploited over the centuries. Another method of investigation was using De Montfort University's scanning electron microscope to identify the individual animal fibers that made up my sample composite felts. I was able to confirm that the 5 types of animal fibers used in Mongolian felt are combined in ratios specific to herd makeup in different areas of the country, as well as the time of year that the felt was made. Once the individual animal fibers were identified and tested, I could then understand their potential to be used in new ways. I began to create novel biocomposites with the animal fibers and other biological components, utilizing the felt making process for synthesis. And now my research is concluding with the development of a rubric for creating new circular wool products based on the technical qualities I've discovered. In Mongolia, wool is already the center of a successful circular system that utilizes every part of herd animals and in which wool products are passed down through generations due to their spiritual significance. In alignment with the traditionally animist views of the nomadic herders, livestock are viewed as equal participants in Mongolian culture, and their slaughter and shearing is viewed as precious. The resulting materials are fully utilized within a closed-loop system. The issue of wool circularity in Mongolia is almost the inverse of the one we're here discussing as facing the UK. However, the wicked problems facing Mongolia are threatening the existing system of wool usage. Western designers, humanitarian groups, and local politicians are now quick to point out that the Mongolian ger should be abandoned in favor of modernizing, moving into planned apartment blocks and permanent Western-style homes. This would break the system of circularity that's developed over centuries and break ties with a cultural and historical material that the Mongolian people hold dear. But by diving into the technical and historical qualities of the wool, I've come to understand its current place in Mongolian culture and propose new models for circularity that could also start to alleviate some of the wicked problems facing the country. I'm developing wool composite building materials for use in a semi-permanent built environment, as well as wool keratin bioplastics and other means of novel material development to use wool in new ways, keep it in circulation, and still honor its role in Mongolian culture. So while the UK doesn't have the same issues facing it as Mongolia, I believe the potential new uses for wool within a circular economy are transferable and can inspire novel system healing in the UK as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. That was so great to hear from such a yeah, brilliant talks on diversity in terms of yeah, looking at enzymatic dyes for wool, to wool keratin, to a whole array of how to understand and embed circular economy principles, and multi-stakeholder approaches, transition design, so many different elements are coming up, and it would be so nice to hear what you all think and how you might relate to it or not at all. And yeah, it's been a lot said and there's a lot of information to digest here, I think, and so much to learn from, as some of it is still in development, and it would be really great to see where it takes us in the next couple of years. And I think, like Jennifer said, it's really interesting how we can learn from different cultures and countries and developments in other parts of the world, and how we can transfer that to the UK system, as each country has got its own different issues and its own different materials to work with, and climates and people, and how do we translate that here. Thank you so much. We will be moving on to our last two speakers of today, and we'll be discussing slow fashion policies, but also understanding the consumer mindset, which hasn't been really discussed today. And I think that might also be because there is that's an area that's more underexplored in this topic, and it would be really exciting to hear. So more talking about slow fashion policies and a new program that's being launched by Fashion Roundtable. That will be Meg Peary. She'll be speaking about that. She is a slow fashion policy expert at the Fashion Roundtable, and she'll be telling us much more about the Regenerating Wool programme and their case study that they've been running. And our last and final speaker, definitely not least, is Dr. Lynn Wilson. I'm not sure if she's in the room, but we are super excited to hear more about her research. She recently, I'm going to speak to my notes, she is a textile designer, circular design practitioner, researcher and educator who recently completed her PhD at the Adam Smith Business School, University of Glasgow. And I'm sure she'll tell us more about that. So I won't go too much into these details, but please do enjoy the last two speakers of today before we're gonna come back to the room and sort of close the session off. I hope you can all stick around for this last part, and really excited, yeah, really excited to share all this with you today. So let me try and get this back up. Oh. Our last series, so enjoy.
Hi there, thanks for having me. I'm Meg Peary and I work for Fashion Roundtable as a slow fashion policy expert, leading on their wool regeneration programme from Wales. I'm also currently completing a Master's in Research and Journalism at Bangor Uni, specifically focused on Welsh wool and the culture and heritage ingrained into this fibre. I really think that leading on a programme like this and being based in rural Wales is fundamental, because I can see the difference that focusing on things like localism, circular economies and onshoring would have on these rural economies. We should be including as many stakeholders as possible within the supply chain and this narrative, when it is clear that those in rural economies currently feel very let down. The first thing I'd really like to share is some of the research from my pilot study, and as I only have a very brief amount of time, I'll try and be as succinct as possible. However, it does go without saying, if you'd like to find out more, please do get in touch with us. So over the last year, I've traipsed through Wales quite literally in my wellies, completing research through qualitative interviews with all the key stakeholders within the wool supply chain, as well as conversations in Scotland, Southwest England and Yorkshire. Some of this will be published as articles over the next few months via Nation Cymru and also Fashion Roundtable's Informer space. So the purpose of this was to gather the fullest possible view of all the barriers within the supply chain currently. And this has taken me across the country to speak with farmers, economists, mill owners, makers, dyers, and also politicians. And while there are many sort of amazing and phenomenal micro businesses looking at solutions, we feel that these need more strategic work to enable a more comprehensive and larger scale redressing of innovation and regenerative wool and business practice. So the first thing I sort of want to talk about is farmers. So from a farming point of view, farmers are incredibly disappointed that wool has been devalued to such an extent. I'm sure you've heard of farmers burning wool because of this. They feel their fleeces have been devalued to the point that they are worthless. And at the time of recording this, wool was sold at 82.1p per kilo. So while farmers have a health and safety obligation to shear their sheep, you know, it's really difficult for them to make any money at the moment. So one specific farmer told me that shearing shortages are pushing the price of this up, meaning that he can't afford the petrol to ship his fleeces, and he's losing about 70p per sheep. So these are currently in his coal shed, and this is not an isolated case. There's also the issue of a combination of larger corporations buying up plots of land in Wales to try and offset their carbon, and they're planting mono trees, as well as a lack of succession planning. And like cumulatively, this provides a domino effect on rural economies and takes away a little bit more of the Welsh language every time. And this connection between culture, language and place is particularly powerful from a heritage point of view, and it can't be underestimated. From a mill owner point of view, so I travelled down to Pembrokeshire and spoke with Melon Trygwyn, who told me they could only get their hands on 20% of British wool. And this is because lead times, you know, it's down to lead times, the supply chain being far too long, as well as British wool not being available at the right quality or easily attainable, which needs to be addressed. They are desperate, however, to use 100% wool, British wool, and they've got a plan moving forward to try and implement this. There was once, 217 mills across Wales, and since I started this research, we've lost another 2. Now 5 are all that are left. Rural mills like these have been working with local farming communities for centuries, and if they're not protected, pose an undeniable risk to the loss of knowledge and artisan skills deeply woven through these close-knit communities. A recent interview with the Welsh Wool Museum provides evidence that they are also working flat out to try and preserve some of these skills. In their words, once these skills are gone, they are lost forever. I have to say I'm really grateful to everyone I've met along the way so far. And while I could continue to talk about all the micro businesses and phenomenal stakeholders I've met along the way, these practices are really fragmented at the moment. We feel that this requires policy work to ensure that best practice is recognised and shared, and this requires governmental support also. We're currently seeking funding to get phase 2 and 3 of our wool regeneration programme underway. And this support would allow us to collate a groundbreaking and much needed report which shines a light on best practice across the board, from farm to processing and onshoring and manufacturing, which would embed an exciting and sustainable circular proposition for British wool. We believe that a policy framework would also ensure that best practice solutions are replicable for many others to do the same. And this is particularly compelling in a view that this level of sustainability acts to preserve heritage and culture, something which we can't ignore. We feel that our programme addresses all of these fundamental issues and more. And so if you'd like to find out any more, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. Thank you.
So my name is Dr. Lynn Wilson, and I'm a qualitative consumer behaviour researcher. I recently completed my PhD in the Adam Smith Business School at the University of Glasgow. Today, I'm going to share my key insights about consumer lived experience in relation to wool garments. The presentation will address how consumers experience wool garment use, management, storage, longevity, and disposal. To put this presentation in context, I'm a multidisciplinary practitioner, you might say a polymath, and I've been working specifically in the field of circular economy textile management for 9 years. But I've been a designer with wool for over 30 years and a consumer of wool my whole life. sometimes in other disciplines other than business management, terms such as user and citizen are used instead of consumer or consumption. But whilst we're all product and service users and practice citizenship, the overarching framework of life is consumption. Baudelaire, a disciple of Bourdieu, labelled consumption an environmental nuisance as early as 1970. Jackson went further in describing consumer behaviour as key to negative environmental impact. Our existential lived experiences, defined by Van Manen as temporality, spatiality, relationality, and corporeality, have never been more threatened by anthropogenic consumption, contributing to climate change. A key challenge to reversing consumption is that consumers feel disconnected from the pressing issue of the climate crisis in their daily lived experience, and there is little evidence of industry and consumer collaboration in terms of keeping resources in use. Some new business models are emerging, but progress is limited, and consumer engagement to understand how to motivate and involve consumers is slow. Evidence is required that identifies what consumers are experiencing, what they perceive to be their experience, and to understand how to support consumers in recognising the global climate crisis and the relationship with clothing. Yet products such as clothing are part of Maslow's hierarchy of need. And my research is interested in the consumer clothing lived experience between the physical, sensory and psychological experience of clothing that leads to decision making that a garment should continue to be used or disposed of. My research looks at the tipping point and triggers that lead to clothing circulation or disposal at the micro level of the self and the meso level of family and community that is then entered into the macro industrial system of clothing disposal, circulation and fibre valorisation. And in other words, I'm really interested in the space between the skin and the garment and what's going on here in relation to consumer clothing circulation. And it's an area that is very underexplored in current consumer behaviour research. And this is important because when we look at the linear process of clothing production that leads to consumption, what we see clearly is that consumers have sole responsibility for clothing disposal. Yes, consumers wear, maintain and store garments prior to disposal and ultimately decide where an item of clothing goes next. Yet they are not the textile expert. They have no idea what is contained within the contents of the garment, but they do know what the garment was used for, whether it has been laundered before disposal, and ultimately the life experience of the owner during wearing of the garment. This information is all lost and overlooked when the garment is passed on to the next stage, and the consequences can be fatal for clothing circulation, disposal, and the next consumer who accesses this post-consumer garment. As designers, we take for granted the knowledge that we have about fibre content, performance, durability and longevity. We know just because we picked up a jumper in the jumper section, that might not contain real wool. Rather, chemical interventions to bluff consumers into believing they are wearing wool. Clothes shopping online or in store can seem overwhelming to consumers if we don't know what we're looking for. The thousands of choices of styles, colours and fibres is confusing, and labels are not consumer friendly. For example, when it comes to wool, the most common problem passed on through wool garments is moth larva, which buries in the wool fibres and can go undetected. Some consumers know how to manage moths to try to eradicate them using various chemical and natural management tools bought in local department stores. In my recent research, I found consumers are exacerbated by the problem of moths. Research tells us that we are now spending up to 90% of our time indoors, and we know during the pandemic this was as much as 100% at times. This leads to a build-up of larva feedstock in the form of keratin from hair and skin. And of course, we're being told as consumers that we need to conserve energy and wash our clothes at no warmer than 30 degrees without clear understanding of whether this is really deeply cleaning our clothes and supporting our hygiene concerns. The National Trust for England reported a 214% increase in moth larva infestations in their properties, eating through clothing and home furnishings. And we know that a lot of it is attributed to climate change in terms of moth activities, but evidence is lacking as to what is really going on and how we can preserve our homes and clothing against moths. If consumers don't know that the pinhole in a garment is not just a snag or a wear hole, they may not be aware of the larva within the garment. They then dispose of it through the charity donation system, and the larva then hatches and spreads throughout other natural fibre products. A new consumer purchases the donated wool garment, thinking the pinhole just needs a simple repair, takes it home and introduces an infestation to their home, which then eats through all of the household carpets at great expense. I know, I was that consumer. Another problem with wool garments for consumers is pilling, usually worse in low-grade or very fine wool garments, which again relies on consumer awareness of how to maintain a garment to remove the pilling. Pilling occurs through the proprioceptive movement of consumer and garment working together, causing an abrasion. What we see is that consumers downgrade garments from social wear to work wear to wearing in the home, as the pilling becomes a more prominent, unmanageable feature of the garment. Consumers then pass on pilled garments through the disposal system, and if you look with the critical eye of a textile designer, you will see our charity shops are full of pilled garments that are a mix of natural and synthetic fibres that have been donated, because consumers finally reject the texture and aesthetics of pilling. As charity shop consumers empathic to the charitable cause, looking for a bargain and committed to clothing reuse, we then consume substandard pilled garments, convincing ourselves it's the right thing to do, when the garment is not of the aesthetic quality it was at the point of our original sale. From my perspective, this is cheating consumers, and this behaviour has evolved over the last 70 years as the quality of all fibre has declined. As circular practitioners, we have the opportunity to change the system and consumer mindset that, for all the reasons I mentioned, it's not okay to invest in post-consumer poorly performing garments. And we need to develop new systems of access to high-performing quality clothing that is affordable and manageable. When consumers are proactive at prolonging the life of clothing and textile through skills interventions, marketing theory refers to them as prosumers, a portmanteau of production and consumption. Traditionally, home knitters have always knitted garments that can be deconstructed, unravelled, and the yarn reknitted in holistic cycles of yarn and garment circularity. For example, in the 1980s in Shetland, there were over 2,000 knitters. Today, there are less than 200, due to the developments of the oil and gas industry moving into Shetland and creating new economies. Once these skills are lost and no longer taught in schools, it is very difficult to reintroduce them at the industrial scale of the critical mass needed to mobilise consumer clothing circularity. Therefore, my presentation ends with a key question of how we ensure we have an army of prosumers equipped with the mindset to make, use, deconstruct and reuse, not relying on the uncertainty of purchasing garments that they have no idea of what they contain. For those of us familiar with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation butterfly, the left-hand side of biodegradability is useful for consumers who have compost sites in their back garden and have the ability to decompose bulky, used and deteriorating pure wool garments that for whatever reason, cannot actually be reworn. The fibres can therefore become soil nutrients. But again, this requires consumer skills development to enable a critical mass of well-informed, skilled consumers. This is the challenge I leave with you today, and I look forward to discussing it with you further in the session. Thanks a lot. Speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was such a brilliant sort of final end to the series of talks. I think you've seen so many different angles to wool and what it means. How do we work with this material? Who is involved? Which aspects should we really look at? Thank you so much, Meg and Lynn, for sharing your work and what you've been doing up to date. As we have come to the final parts of the session, I am going to share the mirror board, and I'm going to ask if Claire Leopinia wants to come on, and if any other panelists would like to come on, so we can actually do a sort of final round off of today's session. Please do add any questions into the chat bar or the Q&A section, and we will do our best to answer those. I'm sure you've got questions coming up, whether they're really directly related to the material, to the systems, to some of people's particular research they've been doing. Anything is great to hear, so please do let me know if you've got any questions. We are going to go to the mirror board, and I can see Claire's come on. So hi Claire, how are you? Oh, you're on mute, I think. Well, I might be. There we go. Yeah.
Okay, right, I'll take my headphones off. Yeah, I thought that was a really fascinating series of presentations, and there were so many kind of common themes that came out. What was particularly interesting, I thought, was all the ways in which we're trying to articulate and document our very tacit knowledge bases. So I think that's a really kind of core aspect to anything that we're doing when we're talking about this space around technology, interdisciplinarity, and also just being an amazing textile designer.
Yeah. I can see Lynn has come on as well. Hi Lynn, thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to say any words about your talk, about anyone's talk, about the topic? Let me know.
I thanks so much. I thought I just felt so much more committed to my own work in informing consumers, listening to the incredibly rich knowledge within the whole 2-hour session, and the fact that it just really enforced in me that idea that consumers don't know any of this, but yet they are the custodians of all this fibre, and we really need to, I'm still even more committed to developing that. But I also really enforced my commitment to multidisciplinary practice. And so, for example, within the business school, in my business school, we wouldn't meet a textile designer or a textile technologist, unless we were in a very special place at a conference or something like that. And so I think there's such a need for those multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary spaces to really work the circle through, to really work the circular economy through. So yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to share. Thank you.
That's so great. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is bringing together multi-stakeholder. I think Claire, you highlighted it as well really nicely with your diagram about this multi-disciplinary approach, and I've seen it in my personal work as well, working with the hair industry, which is obviously different industry, but also very much needed to speak to different practitioners in the field. I do think that, yes, that's needed, but I also can see how difficult that sometimes is, how to get people from different disciplines together in the same room. And I do wonder how could design research then help to enable that more, like what is needed to enable these conversations, these discussions amongst different disciplines. Like, is there a need for, well, Zoom obviously brings lots of people more easily together in a room, more digitally, but I do wonder what kind of platforms or networks can we create to really foster that multidisciplinary collaboration. I think that's a big question to ask, how we promote that more. I wonder if there's any questions from the audience, because I can see that we've got quite a nice big number of people in the room, and I'm sure different backgrounds, and maybe we do have a very multidisciplinary room. So it'd be really nice to hear what if anyone has any questions. I can see Jennifer has come on as well. That's brilliant. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your talk. Yeah, do let me know if you want to come on and say your thoughts as well about today.
I think, just while we're waiting for questions, I think one of the things that we need to think about as, if we're talking from a design perspective, is that in textiles, we have, I teach textile design, I have done for a number of years. And when I teach my students about professional practice and how to go out into the world, we talk very much about the unique skills that you develop as a textile designer, because our design process is a service rather than that we have an artifact at the end of it, but the artifact gets interpreted into something else. Usually it becomes a garment or an airplane or, whatever else it becomes. So actually that gives us a unique set of attributes in terms of our ability to negotiate with different subject areas and to get to kind of form a nexus, a hub for some of these other areas to intersect. So I think that there's a lot that's quite special about being a textile designer in terms of the way that we develop those skills. And I think, Jennifer is a really good example of that, because she's got a architecture background, a fibre background, and now she's doing archival research, but also scientific research.
Yeah, that's an incredible palette of different expertises in one. And I have seen that before in different disciplines, whether people are now studying biodesign, they previously studied architecture. And it's really wonderful to see how those different disciplines merges and how things do come back. So I do think sometimes it is good to, before going into the sort of interdisciplinary field, to first become an expert of a theme or a topic, or what are you good at and how can you utilize your skills really well. I'm just going to check into the chat box.
There is a query about whether from Catherine's iPad, asking whether mills need to adapt for different fleece types as they're in the early stages of opening a Highland mill.
That's a good question, and I think I guess slightly more technical. Is there anyone here from you guys, from panelists, that would like to answer that?
If no one can, it could be something that I could pass to our research director, because he's worked with milling and processing. So do feel free. I'll just drop my email into the chat if anyone's got anything they'd like to pick up for. But yeah, maybe some of our mill experts would be able to answer that. Definitely.
I think, we do need some mill experts in the room to be able to answer that, or people that have worked closely with mills, I think. And Angela mentioned low water, low energy scouring processes. Would love to have more info on this and whether it can be adapted to small scale private water mills. And I think I do, having visited a scouring plant, I can see the sort of volume that goes into these places, and it's huge. And speaking to one of the directors in one of the scouring places, it is really difficult for a small scale studio or design individuals to get into the system of like doing it on a small scale. So yeah, it is really interesting to hear, Angela, if you do have more. Angela is not in the room, I can see, but again, that might be something we could connect up later if Angela wants to get in touch, or Catherine wants to get in touch with Angela. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think I put a sort of how might we question into the mirror, like how can we make this accessible on a more smaller scale? Because I do think that that is a barrier for young textile designers or studios that do want to really be part of this, and I think that's really necessary. But how do we enable that for that scale, and what are the processes involved? I do know that as part of the Shemakes project, they did look into sort of really DIY low-key scouring processes. So do have a look later on the Shemakes handbook of different countries in Europe that try to do this process on a much smaller scale. Not entirely sure how successful I was, but I was definitely an attempt. And I think that is an interesting starting point of like.
And I've dropped Angela's email into the chat as well, because that's definitely her area of expertise.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, great question, I think, about the sort of small scale. Anyone else want to jump on? Any questions? I can see Chiara raised her hand. I don't know if we have the ability to put people's mics on. I'm gonna see if this works. Sorry, I'm multitasking here. Chiara, allowed to talk. Okay, there we go. There we go.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Chiara, how are you?
Good, thanks. So thank you very much for this wonderful and very informative session. So I was wondering if there was a sort of a plan of creating a platform for circular wool, because I think that could be a potential tool for like all these stakeholders and to assess a lot of like knowledge and resources.
Definitely. I think that was also one of the questions that raised during the talk for me, because I do think hosting these talks does bring loads of people together, but what do we do after this call? We all go back to a sort of our own silos again and continue with our own research, which is brilliant, but how do we keep connecting? Maybe that is a simple task of setting up a LinkedIn network, which is maybe a bit too dull, but an equivalent, something like that would be good to sort of keep the network growing in the UK, because yeah, we've got this now, and it's already been going the last few years. We've only sort of just joined in, and yeah, great question. I don't have the answer, but I do I do agree with your suggestion. So yeah, let's join together and think of things that how we can continue the network, and any ideas definitely welcome.
Thank you. I think there is a sort of the KTN was thinking of doing a network on wool.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard anything.
I haven't heard either. Yeah, we joined into that the sort of launch of that network as well. So hopefully that sort of is the start of like a sort of national network, and with that we can hopefully grow it more. I'm gonna answer one more question. I can see that Rachel also raised her hand, so I'm gonna add you. Permitted talking. If you wanna, Rachel, say something, go for it. And if that was accidental, don't worry either. We'll have 2 more minutes left of the event, so do reach out to us if you do have any more questions. And thank you so much, Claire and Lynn and Jennifer, to come on and sort of say hi for to sort of facilitate towards the end. I'm going to share my last slide on the PowerPoint to give a final thank you for today's event. I think it's been so brilliant hearing all these talks, and yeah, we do like to continue the conversations, and thank you so much to all the 3 partners, collaborative partners involved into making this project happen. And there's a few important dates to note down. If you are coming to the Design Research Society conference in Bilbao, whether that's online or in person, do come to our Circular Design Stakeholders Workshop on the 30th of June, and obviously not to forget the World Circular Textiles Day, which is happening on the 8th of October. So do keep our social media in check. Yeah, that was it of today. I hope you can all enjoy the sunshine wherever you are. Please do let me know if I've missed anything. I'm just checking. No, that was great. Okay, thank you so much for everyone for joining, and we'll be in touch where the recording is being sent to once confirmed. So thank you so much for today's session, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sana, as well for organising this and being an amazing chair.
Thank you, Claire. That's very kind. Thank you.